is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have ourselves a jam-packed show, as we have a lot to get into, such as Long Beach State taking down Hawaii twice and taking control of the Big West Conference standings. Can they close out and become regular season champions? And how about UCLA outlasting USC and winning both matches, including handing the Trojans their first home loss? How big were UCLA's wins? And we had a crazy weekend of beach volleyball as we had upsets all over the place, including in the top three. Also, the NBA kicks off this weekend. I am so pumped to deliver you that NBA Week 1 action. Hand me a volleyball, set up the net, because I'm about to serve you all some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. I hope you all are enjoying your Monday evening, your Monday afternoon, your Monday whenever, depending on when you are listening from. I hope you all are just enjoying your day. I know I am, because I got a lot of volleyball to get into for this show. Without any further delay, let's cover that volleyball action. But first and foremost, we have a word from our sponsors. IE Sports Radio is proud to call the Southern California Warriors semi-pro football team the official sponsor of IE Sports Radio. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get filmed to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you've been waiting for as an athlete. You can follow them on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, on Instagram at Southern California_Warriors, and on Facebook by typing in the word Southern California Warriors. And IE Sports Radio is also available on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at IE Sports Radio, and on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then Sports, then Radio. Also, they have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, and when you go there, you will see a Patreon link which starts off at $5 a month. This donation gets you a shout-out from all 30 of our shows, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to our podcasting university, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment. Because for the past 7.5 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, IE Sports Radio has been by the fans and for the fans, and with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you, everyone, for all of your support and for your contribution and for helping make IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. And the 2022 NFL Draft is right around the corner. IE Sports Radio is excited to announce its third annual mock draft challenge. The rules are simple. Predict all 32 first-round picks. No trades, no modifications, no pass and go, no collecting $200, none of that. The participant who has the best mock draft will receive a shout-out from all of IE Sports Radio shows and their choice of an IE Sports Radio hat or shirt. For more information or to submit your mock draft, please reach out to Mike Pat at letswine_IESR. His Twitter is in the description of the show. And best of all, and most importantly, good luck. And we have to give a shout out to IE Sports Radio's new fan of the month for April. She is known as Marcy Vargas. Her Twitter is at Marcy_Vargas88. She is a Green Bay Packers fan who hails from Mexico. So IE Sports Radio has been all over the world reaching out to people from everywhere, from country to country to country. And we hope to continue to reach out to different places all over the world. Now let's get on into that volleyball action. So we had quite a few upsets. We only had 2. It wasn't like last week where we had 6. But we welcome Marcus Vitale in the chat room. He says, have a great show. I appreciate it. But we'll start with the first upset. Hawaii Long Beach State wasn't the only noteworthy matchup that was going on this weekend. We had Cal State Northridge at number 9 UC San Diego. This happened on Thursday. This was before the big 2-match duel between Hawaii and Long Beach State. So the first set, UC San Diego led 4-2 early on, but they lost the lead as the Matadors tied it up at 6-6. CSUN led 7-6, and then they never trailed again. However, UC San Diego did tie the setup at 16-16. CSUN led by as many as 3, and they led 23-20. But the Tritons responded with 2 straight points to make it 23-22. But Kyle Hobus scored the last 2 points for CSUN via kills as he helped the Matadors take set 1 25-23, which had a lot of UC San Diego fans scratching their heads wondering what the heck just happened. Then in set 2, CSUN led early, but UC San Diego grabbed the lead at 9-8. But then 2 points later, courtesy of a UC San Diego service error and a kill from Daniel Wetter, Cal State Northridge didn't trail again. They used a 4-0 run to break a 10-10 tie to eventually take the set 25-21, and CSUN led by as many as 6 in set number 2, as UC San Diego found themselves down 0-2, which had many Triton fans wondering, what is this team doing? And then in set 3, UC San Diego's lead was only 2-1. After that, CSUN never trailed. But you have to give credit to the Tritons. They made it interesting. They kept themselves within striking distance, trailing by no more than 2 points throughout 2/3 of the set. With CSUN leading 18-17, the Matadors went on a 4-0 run to put the set out of reach, winning set 3 25-19 and pulling off their biggest win of the season. I can go as far as to say that this one was even bigger than the Stanford win on the road, as UC San Diego had 0 players with double digits in kills, and they only had 29 kills on the night compared to Cal State Northridge's 43. UC San Diego also got outblocked 7.5-3, and they got outdug 34-25, as Northridge was led by Kyle Hobus, who had 12 kills. He hit .417, while Daniel Wetter added 11 kills while hitting .529. In terms of digs, CSUN was led by Joe Picone, who had 9 digs. The Matadors also hit .368, which is quite impressive. Despite missing 19 serves, the Matadors really dominated most of the match. They really had a lot of momentum against UC San Diego, and that's a big win for them, because winning on the road against a top 10 team is not easy. Marcus says that stinks when you are staying in a game and you just can't hang on, and he really means that. Yeah, it really does suck when you're within striking distance, but you just can't put your foot on the gas. You're going to be seeing that a little bit later on as I recap some of these matches. As for UC San Diego, they were led by Ryan Ka, who had 8 kills. Wyatt Harrison chipped in 7 kills, and Kyle McCauley added 6 kills. UC San Diego hit .141 for the night, which was completely dreadful considering they have such talented players that could hit the ball really hard. And while UC San Diego only missed 11 serves, they only had 2 aces, but once again, they got dominated in practically every category outside of the service errors. So the good news is for UC San Diego, they bounced back in a big way as they beat Northridge at Northridge in straight sets on Saturday, 25-19, 32-30, and 25-22. So it was a good bounce-back win for UC San Diego, but now their Big West Conference regular season title hopes are pretty much done for, especially with what happened with Long Beach State and Hawaii. Jumping over to the MIVA, we had number 15 McKendree taking on Ohio State. Ohio State was playing its last home game at the Covelli Center, as both teams were looking to get back on track, as the Bearcats fell to Ball State on Thursday in straight sets, which pretty much crushed their chances of being the MIVA regular season champions. The Buckeyes, on the other hand, fell to Lewis in 4 sets the same night at the Covelli Center. So set 1. Ohio State led 8-4 early on, and to their credit, they actually led throughout the entire set. Now, Marcus mentioned that it stinks when you're staying in the game, but you just can't hang on and pounce on them. This was actually the opposite. McKendree, on the other hand, tied the setup at 23-23, only to see Ohio State score the next point to put them at set point at 24-23. Ohio State unfortunately missed a serve, and McKendree had a service ace from Tommy McGrath to give McKendree its first lead of the set at 25-24. Despite Ohio State dodging 1 set point, McKendree scored the last 2 points to take set 1 27-25. So this time for Marcus and his comment, this was actually Ohio State leading most of the way and then just crumbling down in the later stages of the set. So jumping to set 2, McKendree led early on, but to Ohio State's credit, they scored 4 straight points to turn a 4-3 deficit into a 7-4 advantage. McKendree knotted it up at 8-8, but Ohio State used a 4-0 run to lead 12-8. They eventually didn't trail again, as Ohio State led by as many as 5, but McKendree roared back into the set. They got within 1 at 19-18, but despite McKendree's best efforts, Ohio State held on to take the second set 25-23, evening the match at 1-1 through 2 sets. Then in set 3, McKendree led 1-0, and then after that, they never led or tied the set ever again, as Ohio State used a 7-0 run to make a 4-3 lead, extend into an 11-3 lead, and they cruised to take set 3 25-16. They were in little to no danger throughout set 3 after trailing 1-0. So it looked as if Ohio State was going to pull the upset. Keep in mind that Ohio State had not beat a ranked opponent since January 22nd when they beat USC in the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge. But set 4, McKendree wasn't going to let Ohio State have their way, as McKendree led early on only to see Ohio State retake the lead at 10-9. McKendree used a 4-0 run to take the lead permanently at 13-10, and they never trailed again in that set, but to Ohio State's amusement, they tied the setup at 13-13 with three straight points. The two teams were actually neck and neck until McKendree scored 2 straight points to go up 20-17 after leading 18-17. McKendree eventually scored the last 4 points to turn a 21-19 advantage to them, winning set 4 25-19, forcing a 5th set. Ohio State was not going to win that easily, said McKendree, as set 5 saw Ohio State lead throughout 2/3 of the set, but they didn't lead by more than 2 points. They just could not finish off McKendree. McKendree tied the set up at 10-10, and they took their first lead of the set at 11-10, following a kill from Patrick Ross. With the two teams tied up at 12-12, Ohio State won the next 2 points with a kill from Cole Young and a service ace from Samuel Clark. Unfortunately for them, a service error from Samuel Clark kept McKendree in the match, but Martin Lalaman clinched the match for them with a kill, giving the Buckeyes set 5 15-13 and giving the Ohio State fans at the Covelli Center something to cheer about in their last regular season home game. As Ohio State was led by they were led by Jacob Pasteur, who had 21 kills. He hit .441. Martin Lalaman had himself a big night as well, with 20 kills, only 1 hitting error, as he hit .500 for the match, which is very impressive. Samuel Clark added 15 kills, but he had 10 hitting errors, but he did have some support from Pasteur and Lalaman. Also, they got 6 kills from Ethan Talley and 9 kills from Cole Young, who didn't have a hitting error, which is quite nice. As a team, Ohio State hit .356, which is very impressive. Their only bad set in terms of hitting percentage was in set number 4, which they hit .185, totaling 7 hitting errors. Ohio State did miss 19 serves and only totaled 3 aces, but their blocking was what really won them the match. They had a whopping 14 blocks on the night compared to McKendree's 5 blocks, and they outdug McKendree by 4 digs, totaling 44 to McKendree's 40. They were led in that department from Samuel Clark, who had 11 digs, while Lallement had 10 digs of his own. As for McKendree, they were led by Patrick Ross, who had 18 kills. He hit .317, while Kevin Shuley chipped in 17 kills. He only had 1 hitting error, and he hit .516, which is very impressive. Ethan Carroll, while he had 11 kills, he had 14 hitting errors, hitting -86, which is not something you want to see. Shuley and Francisco Comas each chipped in 11 digs, as McKendree only missed 12 serves and had 4 service aces. As a team, McKendree hit .272, which isn't bad, but compared to Ohio State's .356, that wasn't going to win them the match. Ohio State really came up big, and they won their first match against a ranked opponent since beating USC. So, good for Ohio State. I really was impressed by them. They needed a breakout win just to give them some momentum going into the MIVA tournament. They can be a sneaky good team, but you look at that MIVA, there's a lot of talent in that conference. Even Lewis and Lindenwood, who aren't in the top 4 or so, top 4, those teams can make noise. Those teams can even make noise. So, honestly, for the MIVA, it's going to come down to this week. Ball State and Loyola won their matches, as Ball State still has a 1-match lead on the Ramblers, as the two actually meet this week. Now, for the rest of the MIVA, it's pretty much just battling for placement. McKendree is still in 3rd place. They cannot win the conference just because they had a rough week. But McKendree is still having themselves a solid week. I think they can make some noise in the MIVA tournament. It's just all about if they can get that momentum and if they can get that matchup with Loyola. Because it seems like McKendree is Loyola's kryptonite. I don't know how, I don't know why, but McKendree always seems to have their best brought out against Loyola. Now, can they do the same against Ball State? That still remains to be seen. And for McKendree, are they rooting for Ball State to win, or are they rooting for Loyola to win? Just because if they face Loyola, then Loyola would have to be the number 2 seed in the MIVA tournament, as opposed to being the number 1 seed. There is the possibility that McKendree could be the number 4 seed, in which they'd have to play the number 1 seed, and if Loyola gets that number 1 seed, that would work out for McKendree's favor, but that would have McKendree losing out and Purdue of Fort Wayne winning out, and then it would also have Ball State losing out, or at least losing to Loyola, and Loyola having the tiebreaker over Ball State. As we say hello to Gina G, she says, "I'm here for the best volleyball show on the planet. Have a great show." And it's all good. You are totally on time. I'm just recapping some of the other noteworthy results from NCAA Men's Volleyball Week 13. But back to the MIVA, it's basically going to come down to the wire here. It's basically Ball State versus Loyola for this week for the regular season crown. So jumping back to California, we had quite the barn burner on Saturday. Hawaii Long Beach State was not the only matchup that was going on Saturday. We had USC at number 1 UCLA. UCLA was trying to inch closer and closer to winning the MPSF regular season title, while USC was trying to get back onto the win column, as USC actually lost its first home game of the season to UCLA in straight sets. Now, USC and UCLA played each other on Thursday, with UCLA sweeping, but the two actually got to play in the Galen Pavilion instead of the Galen Center, which is actually the smaller gym of the Galen Center. So, I have heard that the crowd is much closer to the court, It's basically the equivalent of a high school gymnasium. But for USC, they have won in that gym against tougher opponents. But I guess against UCLA, they just were no match. Just because it's so strange to see USC losing in straight sets against UCLA. But I guess that shows the talent level that UCLA has. Against UCLA on Saturday, this was an interesting match. So the first set, USC only trailed once, 1-0. That was all. USC used a 3-0 run to turn a 6-5 lead into a 9-5 advantage. And USC had the advantage throughout most of the set until UCLA tied it up at 18-18. And from there, it was back and forth. It was a tug of war. It was tied at 21-21 when USC scored the next 2 points from Simon Gallas and a service ace from Kevin Coburn, which put USC up 23-21. The Coburn brothers, Sam and Kevin, Sam from USC and Kevin, exchanged service errors, which I think is pretty interesting. USC eventually had set point at 24-22, and despite needing a second set point, they clinched the set 25-23 off of a UCLA service error. Now UCLA, get this, they missed 34 serves in this match on Saturday. And missed serves seems to be becoming the norm for UCLA and head coach John Speraw. But John Speraw is nowhere near concerned for missed serves. Keep that in mind. Set 2, UCLA never trailed, but that didn't mean USC was going to get stomped on. Early on, it was tight, with UCLA only leading 13-12. However, they used a 5-1 run to run away with the set, winning set 2 25-19. It was basically UCLA's set to... They needed to win that set. They needed to win set 2, otherwise being down 0-2 against a talented USC team was not going to be ideal for them. Now for set 3. Much like set 1, USC only trailed once, 1-0. But unlike the first set, the Trojans took charge early and they never looked back. They led 8-3, and from there, they were not slowing down for anybody. UCLA got no closer than 3 points, as USC led by as many as 10, and on the road, mind you, as they powered their way to winning set 3, 25-17, leading the match 2-1. And the Trojan fans at Pauley Pavilion were thinking, this is our time to win at Pauley Pavilion, because you have to take it back to 2015, where USC last won at Pauley Pavilion. It's been that long for USC winning at Pauley Pavilion. But set 3 did not deter the Bruins. USC scored the first 2 points of set number 4, but that lead would only be an afterthought, as UCLA scored the next 4 points, and they never relinquished the lead, as UCLA led by as many as 12 that set, and eventually they drubbed USC 25-12, as USC didn't even crack the halfway point of 25 points. So you have to give credit to UCLA. They could have easily just waved the white flag and just said, all right, we got stomped on in that third set. We're probably going to lose. But John Speraw, whatever he said, must have really fired up the UCLA Bruins. Now for set 5. UCLA kept its momentum up from set 4 as they jumped out to an early 4-2 lead, only to see USC rattle off the next 3 points to lead 5-4. After that, UCLA scored 3 straight points of their own to make it 7-5. And at that point, it was just basically a cat and mouse game. Every time USC got within 1 point, UCLA went up by 2. That was the problem for USC. They just could not score when they served. They couldn't score via a service ace. They couldn't score via a pressurized error from UCLA. UCLA just basically was playing cat and mouse with USC. And eventually, with UCLA clinging to a 13-12 lead, they went up 14-12 off of a kill from Miles Partain, setting up their first match point. And on their next point, USC just had to force it over, which was easily dug up by the UCLA defense. Eventually, UCLA set up Miles Partain, who got them the kill, winning set 5 15-12, and giving UCLA fans something to really cheer about, as they denied USC's first win at Pauley Pavilion since 2015. And now that gives UCLA the clear track to pretty much clinch the MPSF regular season title. And honestly, they're getting really close to winning that title. I just don't see any team remaining on their schedule that can stack up with them. Their last two opponents are Pepperdine and BYU. BYU is clearly in rebuild mode. They lost half their team to graduation. Obviously, you can never underestimate anyone, but on paper, that one looks like a surefire win for UCLA. Now, on the other hand, Pepperdine still has a chance to win the MPSF. They still have a chance. They're actually in second place at 5-3, while UCLA is 7-1 in conference. The only way Pepperdine can win the regular season conference is if they win this week and then they win next week. They have to run the table. And they're sure as heck not going to get any help from BYU, because I do not see them beating UCLA. But for Pepperdine, they have a massive hill to climb if they want to become regular season MPSF champions. For UCLA, they're basically riding a wave of momentum. They have won 5 in a row, which is actually the most in their conference, as they're basically just rolling over their opponents, and they're going to look to try to put the nail in the coffin when it comes to locking up that MPSF championship. The only way Pepperdine can clinch at least a share of the MPSF regular season title is if they split their matchup against UCLA. Then they have the tiebreaker in terms of number of sets won or points, and then Pepperdine just wins out, and then UCLA loses out to BYU. If that happens, then the two teams will share the regular season title, and then Pepperdine will be the number 1 seed in the up-and-coming MPSF tournament. But the big important thing is that UCLA controls its destiny. That is the big important thing for the Bruins. They needed to beat USC. If not, then USC would have been in a much better position than they are now, because USC is currently 4-4 in the conference, and they basically have no hope of winning the MPSF. They would need UCLA to lose out, and then they would also have to win out. And then they would also need help from Pepperdine to lose. So all in all, for USC, this was kind of their chance to to inch closer to winning the MPSF, but unfortunately they blew it, and it's not gonna have them winning the MPSF regular season title. So other noteworthy scores and news in Week 13. Penn State won the EIVA regular season championship as they swept Sacred Heart at home and St. Francis on the road. Penn State has now won 16 in a row, I want to say, as they just continue to win, as they are the number 1 seed of the EIVA, and they are the host site for the EIVA tournament. On the topic of EIVA, NJIT got back into the win column with sweeps over Sacred Heart and Harvard. And keep in mind, NJIT lost to Harvard the first go-around. NJIT and Harvard are tied for second place in the EIVA, but the difference is NJIT has to deal with Penn State this weekend. And Penn State has had no stoppage for anybody. The only time that they came close to losing an EIVA match was when NJIT pushed them to 5. But this time, NJIT has to go over to Happy Valley to take on Penn State at Rec Hall. Harvard, on the other hand, doesn't have to deal with Penn State throughout the regular season anymore, as if for some reason Harvard wins out and then NJIT loses along the way, Harvard will be the 2 seed and then NJIT will be the 3 seed. But I think NJIT is in a good position regardless. For NJIT, I think being the 2 or 3 seed would be the best thing for them. I feel if they get the 2 or 3 seed, I think they'll be in a good position just because they don't want to play Penn State before the final, because NJIT mostly plays better when its chips are on the table, even against ranked opponents on the road. Now, this week is their biggest test. If NJIT can hang with Penn State, like take a set off them, or take them to 5, or even upset them, I think NJIT is for real in the EIVA. Mark Pavlik basically said it best. The EIVA is no longer your grandfather's conference. Everybody is improved and everybody is good. Harvard, despite losing over the weekend, has clinched a spot in the EIVA tournament. Only the top 6 teams in the EIVA can participate in the EIVA tournament. Back to NJIT. I feel NJIT still has that potential. They have great players on their team, and they are well coached. The question is, can they come up big against Penn State? And once again, they have to win the EIVA tournament. I highly doubt they'll get in as an at-large because currently they are unranked, or last week they are unranked. I guess I kind of spoiled if they're ranked or not. They are not ranked this week. But for NJIT, they have to win the EIVA tournament just because, unless, of course, other teams decline a spot in the tournament, NJIT is pretty much either tournament champs or bust. Because I don't think they have the resume to become an at-large team. Yes, they had a few early wins over the weekend, or earlier in the season, but for NJIT, their resume doesn't really scream this team deserves to be in the NCAA tournament. Not compared to the schedule of Loyola or Hawaii or USC or Pepperdine or Santa Barbara. You get the rest. So for NJIT, it's basically win your conference tournament or you basically are going home. I'm not trying to deter NJIT just because I'm still sold on them. I think they are vastly underrated, and I think they have talent and potential on their team. It's just that against Penn State, that's going to be the biggest hill to climb. We'll see how they do when it comes to this weekend against the Nittany Lions. And then also jumping to the Conference Carolinas, we have Mount Olive and North Greenfield tied atop of the conference at 10-2. Both of Mount Olive's conferences, however, have come to North Greenville. So I imagine North Greenville will be getting the number 1 seed in the Conference Carolinas tournament. We shall see what happens because Mount Olive has 3 matches left, and I imagine North Greenville does too. So we'll see where both those teams will end up by the end of the season. So that is going to do it for those matches. Now we got to go over the match or the series of the week. Hawaii versus Long Beach State. Number 2 in the nation versus number 4 in the nation. Both of these teams tied atop the preseason coaches polls in terms of the Big West Conference, as this series did not disappoint. It was a raucous crowd as even Hawaii fans flew all the way from Hawaii to Long Beach to cheer on their beloved Rainbow Warriors. As for Long Beach, they obviously had themselves a big crowd all over the place, as the first set was basically a tug of war. 11 ties, 2 lead changes, as neither of these teams were backing down from one another. Both of these teams basically won that first set. In the end, it was a barn burner. I really can't explain it all that much, just because Hawaii led 15-14 at the media timeout, and then it was just back and forth. Hawaii led 21-20, forcing a Long Beach State timeout, and then the two teams were tied at 23-23, but then, I'm sorry, that was actually the second match. The first match, Long Beach State led 15-14, and then Hawaii answered with three straight points. If I could actually find my correct sets. So Hawaii led 13-10 in set 1, and then Long Beach State went up 17-15, and then Hawaii led 21-20 at one point, and Hawaii then pulled up 23-21 in set 1, and eventually won the first set 25-22 off of a kill from Spiros Chakas. And yes, I'm going to try to pronounce some of these names correctly. So basically, this match, I just can't explain it. This match was absolutely bonkers, as it was tight in the second set. 14 ties, 5 lead changes, as I got to experience Jakob Tella kills, like his actual setter-like kills, as it looks like he's going to fake the set, but boom, he just spikes it down. Hawaii led 13-10 in set 2, but then Long Beach State went up 21-20, and then 2 straight points from Hawaii gave them the lead at 22-21. But then Long Beach State answered, trailing 23-22, but then they answered with 2 straight points, leading 24-23. And then eventually an Alex Nikolov service ace gave them set 2 25-23. And you have to give credit to Long Beach State. They could have easily folded when trailing by 1 in that close set. But to their credit, they really held on and they really turned the tables on them. And at that point, I was like, yep, this match is definitely leading up to the potential. It's living up to the potential, as honestly, I was just at a loss for words. I'm like, oh my goodness, we are in for a rocky and bumpy ride. And then Hawaii led Long Beach State 15-14 at the media timeout. But then they went, and then they eventually went up 17-14. If I could find the right set, and they did, as they went up 17-14. And it was just a crazy, crazy sequence. Even Jakub Tella was getting kills on the right side. Dimitrios Muchilas gave Hawaii a 21-19 lead in set 3. But then Nathan Harlan, listen to this guy's name. Nathan Harlan had no relation to Kevin Harlan. He had himself back-to-back aces when Long Beach State trailed 21-20, as that put them up 22-21. Hawaii eventually tied it up at 24 apiece, dodging 2 set points from Long Beach State. But then Clark Godbold and Simon Torwey gave Long Beach State set 3, 26-24. It was very, very intense. Once again, this match led up to the hype. This match was basically the hype. It was more than just the hype. It just broke the hype barrier. Hawaii led 18-16 at one point in set number 4, as Long Beach State eventually came back to lead at 21-20. But just like set number 3, it was tied up at 24-24. Neither of these teams were giving an inch. And then eventually it was tied up at 25-25. But then Long Beach State took the next 2 points with a overpass kill from Spencer Olivier. And here was the sounds from that match point. Yeah, and that was without my Bluetooth speaker, which, my apologies, I wish I could have had that on, but you get how, if you were at the match, you would know how electric it is. It was basically heart-stopping. It was just bonkers, crazy, bananas. You get the point. So, moving on to match number 2, but actually first, recap of match number 1. Long Beach State was led by Alex Nikolov, who had 23 kills. He hit .333. Mason Briggs chipped in 17 digs. Spencer Olivier had 21 kills. He hit .372. And Clark Godbold added 13 kills, and he hit .310. Something that Long Beach State didn't really do was they didn't really run the middle all that much, as they only got 6 kills from their middle blockers, 3 apiece from Shane Holdaway and Simon Torwey. They started Mark Moody, and then they eventually shuffled him around with Torwey and Holdaway, as eventually Long Beach State paved the way, as they also outblocked Hawaii 12-8.5, which is quite big. Their middle blocker, Simon Torwey, was the one that paved the way, as he had 8 block assists, even though that totals out to being 8 blocks in general. Regardless, Long Beach State hit 324 for the match, which was very impressive. Against a talented Hawaii team that is quite nice. Harlan had 3 service aces for Long Beach State, which was very impressive as well. As a team, Long Beach State, despite missing 26 serves, had 8 service aces, while Hawaii only had 1 service ace, which came from Dimitrios Mouchilas. Hawaii was led by Chaz Galloway, who had 13 kills. Garame Voss added 9 kills along with Spiros Chakas. Cole Hoagland added 8 kills. And as a team, Hawaii hit 264, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't the best. It wasn't like natural Hawaii volleyball. Granted, Hawaii is... I'll get into what their lineup is, but Hawaii is young this year. Keep in mind they lost a lot to graduation. They lost Rado Parupanov, and then they also lost other players like Colton Cowell, Patrick Gassman. You get the point. But they have other talented players on their team, such as Brett Sheward, who had 15 digs, while Jakob Tella had added 11 digs to go along with his 35 assists. Galloway added 9 digs. As a team, Hawaii outdug Long Beach State 47-42. And all in all for Hawaii, they gave it their best effort. Like, all of the sets they lost were by 2 points. It does not get any closer than that. And it's not Hawaii not being a good team. It's Long Beach State just having a little bit more grit. And once again, Hawaii is a young team, and they're on the road in a different time zone. I get it. They've played in different time zones against other California opponents, but against this opponent in a hostile environment, in a playoff-like environment, it's basically a whole different animal. Now, for the second matchup, it was tight early on, as you thought the first set of Hawaii-Long Beach State round 1 was crazy. Round 2 between Long Beach State and Hawaii was even crazier. The first set, there were 18 ties in 9 lead changes. It was basically that much of a tug of war. There were digs, pancakes flying all over the place. There were kills getting spiked around. It was just all around crazy. Spiros Chakas gave Hawaii the lead at 21-20, and eventually Hawaii led 23-21, and it looked as if Hawaii was going to take the first set just like the previous match. However, you got to give credit to Long Beach State. They had not 1, not 2, but 3 blocks in a row to give them set point at 24-23. Then at 24-23, Alex Nikolov dealt a service ace, and Long Beach State took the first set 25-23. I want to say that was the momentum that swung from Hawaii over to Long Beach State. I think if Hawaii takes that opening set, it's a whole different ballgame. Hawaii's feeling good about themselves, up 1-0 on the road, winning a close set against a talented Long Beach State team. And all in all, I think that kind of swung the momentum to Long Beach State. It sucked all the momentum out of Hawaii, as they probably were just stunned. Now, after set 1, this was probably what I pondered the most. Dimitrios Mouchilas unfortunately did not play the second, third, or fourth set, or rest of the way, as I don't know if head coach Charlie Wade just took him out because he wanted to give his other opposites a chance, or maybe Mouchilas was injured. I did not get the chance to talk with Charlie Wade after the game, but he was just on the sideline. He was still up, but it looked like his fingers were taped up, his wrist was taped up, so he might have had a few injuries, or he was a little banged up. So we got to see other players come in for Hawaii at the opposite position. Jumping over to set number 2, Long Beach State led 9-7 as they forced a Hawaii timeout. Long Beach State eventually led 14-13, but then Hawaii tried to come back, but to the dismay of Hawaii, Long Beach State had the great wall of Simon Torwee, who also dealt service aces, as we say hello to Cale Henderson, who popped in the chat room. Just recapping some Hawaii Long Beach State men's volleyball action, which I covered this past weekend. And to Hawaii's credit, they did all that they could. They won big rallies, but unfortunately for Long Beach State, they were just too much for them, as they had Alex Nikolov just making big plays, as he gave Long Beach State set number 2, 25-20, and a 2-0 lead for the match. It was actually the first time throughout the entire series that a set was not decided by 2 or 3 points, as Hawaii was plagued by service errors. They actually had 5 service errors, which, to me, I think that kind of hurt Hawaii in the long run. As we got to see at the opposite position, Alakai Todd, who made the most of his opportunities. He had 3 kills early on in set number 3, as he gave Hawaii a 7-6 lead. But then Hawaii just could not pull away from Long Beach State. It was like they were trapped in quicksand, as they eventually built a 5-point lead. They led 17-12, and it looked as if Hawaii was going to get an easy path to a 4th set. But to Long Beach State's credit, they came back. They roared all the way back, making the score 21-20. Then this crucial point for Hawaii came into play, as Hawaii libero Brett Sheward had a dig kill, which I guess there was a little miscommunication from Long Beach State's side, as they didn't know who was going to get the ball, as Hawaii led 22-20. It was only a 2-point lead, but that dig kill by Brett Sheward forced the timeout from Alan Knipe. And I want to go as far as to say that without that dig kill, I don't know if Hawaii takes that 3rd set. I'm not trying to say Hawaii wouldn't have won the 3rd set, but that was the turning point of set 3 for Hawaii. Brett Sheward was phenomenal, as Hawaii won the 3rd set from Long Beach State 25-21 off of a service error. And to the credit of Hawaii, they did not give up. They jumped out to an early 5-0 lead in set number 4. And Hawaii fans are probably thinking, okay, this one's going to go 5 sets. And Long Beach State fans were probably holding their breath, wondering what is going on with our team. But as gritty as Long Beach State is, they actually trailed 9-4, but then they used a 6-1 run to tie the setup at 10-10. Then it was a whole different ball game when it came to Long Beach State and Hawaii, as eventually Long Beach State went up by 4, 18-14, as Alex Nikolov was getting kill after kill and making dig after dig and big play after big play. He actually registered a double-double in this match. More on that later. And Hawaii, to their credit, they tried to win as many rallies as they could. They won lots of extended rallies, which to me was impressive, but they just could not get that win against Long Beach State, as Long Beach State eventually finished them off, winning set 4, 25-19, clinching the series, moving them one step closer to winning the Big West Conference regular season title, as Long Beach State hit 350 for the match. That was huge right there. Long Beach State, again, when you play Long Beach State, you cannot have them hitting in the 350s. You have to get them under 200, as they're led by Nikolov, who had 18 kills. He hit 484, while Spencer Olivier and Clark Godbold each had 12 kills. Godbold hit 333 and only had 1 hitting error on the night. And once again, Long Beach State went to the pin hitters. They didn't really go to the middles all that much. They only had 6 middles, or 6 kills from the middle blockers. 3 from Mark Moody and 11 from Simon Torwey. As, once again, Long Beach State hit 350. The big thing for Long Beach State was they outblocked Hawaii 16.5 to 8.5. As they got a lot of blocks from Mark Moody. They got 8 blocks from Simon Torwey. It was just a block party at Long Beach State, and all that was missing was the hot dogs and the hamburgers. They also got 47 digs on the night, as they got 12 from Nikolov and 16 from Mason Briggs, who is the human shovel, in my opinion, when it comes to volleyball. Bad pun, I know. Hawaii, on the other hand, was led by Guilherme Voss and Spiros Chakas, who each had 11 kills. The 11 kills for Voss are actually a career high for him, just because he's only a sophomore and he hasn't really seen a whole lot of playing time. But Guilherme Voss has impressed as of late when it comes to the middle blocker position. With the departure, with Dimitrios Mouchilas not playing, Alakai Todd had 7 kills. And I think what really hurt Hawaii was that Chaz Galloway wasn't really involved all that much. He only had 5 kills. He had 6 hitting errors. He hit negative 38. But that's because Hawaii was not... They didn't really pass the best, as they had a season-high 28 hitting errors. You cannot beat Long Beach State with 28 hitting errors. Long Beach State, on the other hand, had 9 hitting errors. When you're only allowing 9 hitting errors, your defense is not doing the best job, in my honest opinion. And this is not being disrespectful to Hawaii. This is, to me, a young Hawaii team, as Hawaii hit 174 on the night, which is a very dreadful sight to see if you're a Hawaii fan. They did get 7 service aces, with 4 of which coming from Jakob Telle. Telle also had 4 kills as well. Brett Sheward chipped in 16 digs to go along with that 1 kill. So all in all, for Hawaii, here's the thing about Hawaii. They start 5 sophomores and 2 juniors. They don't start any seniors, which to me is surprising, yet they're still having a phenomenal season. And they're number 4 in the nation. Or they were number 4 in the nation. So for Hawaii, their future is bright. Unfortunately, against Long Beach State, they just didn't shine bright enough. But this does not mean they're not a good team. I think Hawaii still has a lot of potential, and they just have to brush themselves off. If they do get to play Long Beach State, it would have to be in the Big West Conference at the earliest, in the Big West Conference tournament in Hawaii. That would be a complete reversal of fate, just because winning at Hawaii is very tough. Because we all thought Long Beach State's crowd at the Pyramid was quite impressive. You should see Stan Sheriff Center or Stan Sheriff Arena when it comes to Hawaii men's volleyball or women's volleyball. Either way, Hawaii has a massive crowd, and it's very deafening. Their cheers can be very deafening. As for Long Beach State, they also have a youthful team. They start Nikolov, who is a freshman, Aiden Knipe, who is a sophomore, Mason Briggs, who is a sophomore. Spencer Olivier is their only senior, as Godbold is also a sophomore. Mark Moody is also a sophomore. Both teams are starting sophomores, so to me, I think both of these teams' future is bright, and I don't think these teams are going anywhere. I think this is going to be a rivalry that is going to be lasting for quite a long time. So I really think that this could be possibly the best NCAA men's volleyball rivalry we'll be seeing in a while. I'm not trying to put down USC or UCLA or Lewis and Loyola or any of the other rivalries, but I think Hawaii and Long Beach State in men's volleyball is the best rivalry in NCAA men's volleyball. So that is going to do it for the Week 13 recap. We're going to just recap the top 15 from this week, then we'll head to a commercial break. So 15 through 11 consists of McKendree at 15, UC Irvine at 14, Lewis at 13, Stanford at 12, and Loyola of Chicago at 11. 10 through 6 consists of UC San Diego at 10, Grand Canyon at 9, Pepperdine at 8, Ball State at 7, and USC at 6. 5 through 1 consists of UC Santa Barbara at 5, Hawaii at 4, Penn State at 3, Long Beach State at 2, and your number 1 team in this week's ABCA Division 1 and 2 men's volleyball coaches poll is UCLA. So despite having to take USC in 5 sets, they are still the number 1 team in the nation. Well deserved, honestly. Both Long Beach State and UCLA are very close to clinching their conference regular season titles, as 4 matches remain for both teams. We're going to take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, we'll have some NCAA Beach Volleyball to talk about. Then we've got the NVA schedule for this weekend. Then we also have the NCAA Men's Volleyball Week 14 preview. You are listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
From the shores of the Puget Sound to the rushing waters of the Columbia River, stretching across the Great Cascades, and on IE Sports Radio lives the Northwest Territory Sports Show, hosted by me, Brad Buckingham. On this show, I cover all the great collegiate and professional sport teams that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, I'm talking about the Seattle Seahawks, Seattle Mariners, Sounders, and even the Seattle Kraken. But I can't forget all of that is good in Oregon either. I got the Trailblazers, the Oregon Ducks, the Beavers, even the Timbers, and much, much more. You can listen to the show every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, noon to 1 p.m. Pacific on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What's up, sports fans? Are you looking for the latest on Northern California sports? Then take a trip out west with me, your host, Gina G, on Reppin' to NorCal Sports, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'll be bringing it to you all the way live every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. And it's always a packed show. I'll bring you everything Dynastic 49ers, the bite of the San Jose Sharks, torture of the San Francisco Giants, the Golden State Warriors that we still believe. Then take you across the bay to the rise and grind of the Oakland A's. I've got you covered on college ball from the Cal Bears to the Stanford Cardinal, so that no matter what, reppin' in NorCal Sports is always reppin' the Bay. So if you bleed red and gold, or you're looking to keep an eye out west in them thar hills, don't miss me, Gina G, on reppin' in NorCal Sports. Catch me every Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, and I'll have your fandom repped harder than a trio of defenders guarding Stephen Curry before his buzzer beater is Gucci.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely do check out our shows, Northwest Territory Sports, Rapid and NorCal Sports, and the Show That Never Sleeps. They are all amazing shows, and definitely check out all of our other amazing shows. I believe we have 29, if not 30, shows here on IE Sports Radio, and we're going to continue to grow and grow. Jumping on over to some NCAA Beach Volleyball action. So last week's NCAA AVCA Top 20 Coaches Poll consisted of Florida Gulf Coast at 20, Stetson at 19, Pepperdine at 18, Arizona at 16, Arizona at 17, Long Beach State at 16, Florida International at 15, South Carolina at 14, Cal at 13, Georgia State and Cal Poly tied for 11th, Florida Atlantic at 10, Hawaii at 9, Stanford at 8, Grand Canyon at 7, LSU at 5, Loyola Marymount or LMU at 5, Florida State at 4, USC at 3, TCU at 2, and your number one team in the AVCA Coaches Poll, or in last week's AVCA Coaches Poll, is UCLA. Now, last week was a completely bonkers week in terms of NCAA Beach Volleyball. So, the elephant in the room has to be addressed. UCLA, number one UCLA, lost twice last week. Both losses came at the hands of TCU, where they lost 4-1 and 3-2. So, for UCLA, they are no longer the invincible, undefeatable monster that everyone comes to fear. But that does not mean they are not going to be winning it all, or they're not a candidate to win the whole thing. I think for UCLA, they needed these losses just because now that they got the bad losses out of the way, they no longer have the pressure of being undefeated and running the table. So TCU is very good. Coming into this week, or last week, TCU was undefeated. And there's a reason why TCU was number 2 in the nation. And they definitely earned their wins. TCU, on the other hand, suffered its first loss of the season, losing yesterday to USC 4-1. But other than that, they didn't lose a match over the weekend, as they actually barely outlasted LSU. Now, jumping back to Thursday, LSU took TCU down. They were up 2-0, I think, at one point. And then TCU switched on the we need to remember how to play volleyball switch, as they won the next 3 matches, winning it 3-2. So for TCU, they suffered that first loss of the season to USC, which was number 3. But just like UCLA, they kind of needed that loss just because they no longer have that pressure of staying undefeated. As Gina says, it's always good to get the losses out of the way early. I agree. You're better off losing now than losing when it truly matters, whether it's in your conference tournament or whether it's in the NCAA tournament. Either way, it's not like they lost to anyone bad. Like, that's going to be for later. But for USC, they were probably the most impressive team of this past weekend, as they didn't lose a match over the weekend, and they beat TCU, like I said, 4-1. They have won 18 matches in a row ever since they lost to UCLA in their second meet, as their number one pair, Tina Gradina and Haley Harward, were named the AVCA Pair of the Week. So for USC, they're proving that they are still one of the top dogs in the nation, as we can't underestimate the Trojans at any point, as most of their wins have actually come via 5-0s, aka sweeps. They also beat Florida International 5-0, they beat Hawaii 5-0, and they beat LSU 4-1. Though the LSU one I thought was closer than expected, but more on LSU later. So USC is looking like they could possibly be the new number one team. Well, the coaches poll comes out tomorrow. It comes out every Tuesday, so unfortunately I don't have the most recent coaches poll, but it's going to be a tough decision of where to put UCLA or TCU or USC. Now, below the top 3, we had probably the most shocking result. We had number 4 Florida State losing to number 18 Pepperdine 3-2 over the weekend, which I thought was very shocking. I did not think that they were going to lose to Pepperdine of all teams. It's like, wow, you lost to Pepperdine? It's like, not that I'm trying to bash Pepperdine, but I just didn't expect it. And it's just so crazy that they lost to Pepperdine. And keep in mind, this was, I want to say it was it was in Florida, which makes it even more mind-blowing. Yeah, it was in North Florida. It was in the North Florida Invite in Jacksonville. So, yeah, Florida State loses to number 18 Pepperdine. That was probably the upset of the weekend, as they're currently 19 and 15 overall, which is still impressive. It's not like they're losing to anyone too terrible. They do have a couple losses in conference play, but as long as those losses don't pile up, they should be fine. I think they will be okay going forward, but that loss to Pepperdine kind of leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Like, if they can't beat Pepperdine, can they really survive against UCLA or USC? They also have TCU coming up on the radar this weekend. And then they also have LSU as well. It's basically the Unconquered Invitational, which is going to be played in Tallahassee, Florida. So I think this is going to be a big test for Florida State coming up. Then jumping down to the number 5 team in the nation, LMU suffered 2 losses last Saturday, one to TCU and one to LSU, both losing 3-2. Now, LMU, obviously, those losses came in the same day, and when you play LSU, one of the powerhouses, which they're still trying to get over the losses of Teran Rodriguez and Kristen Noose, I think they're still up there in terms of the top teams. And then obviously TCU is just a dominating force. There's no shame in losing 3-2. The rest of the way, LMU won their other matches, but for LMU, they kind of took a step backwards in terms of trying to beat a team superior to them, but there's still lots of season remaining. And once again, there's no shame in losing to TCU and LSU. LSU, once again, still a powerhouse team, and TCU just having a phenomenal season, building off of last year's surprise run in the NCAA tournament. I think LMU will be fine. Remember, this is an LMU team that finished 3rd in the NCAA tournament behind UCLA and USC. So we can't really expect LMU to rebuild that same team from last year. Jumping down to the number 16 team, LSU lost to USC, like I just previously mentioned, 4-1, and they also narrowly lost to UCLA 3-2. Now, that UCLA loss, just like the first meeting with UCLA, it came down to the final match. And that final match went to a decisive third set, which UCLA pulled out by the skin of their teeth. Once again, this is a UCLA team trying to get over the loss of their top pair, their top historic pair, for that matter, from last season, as LSU is still doing pretty good. For not having a top pair, for trying to for shuffling its team around from the 2 spot to the 3 spot and the 4 spot, LSU is actually doing very good. And I think they're still a team to watch for. And I think they could be a team that no team wants to play. Even UCLA. I don't think UCLA wants to beat them. Yes, they lost to USC 4-1, but even those sets were close. I want to say 2, if not 3 of those matches went to a decisive third set. So I think LSU is still doing good things. Now, Gina actually mentioned in the chat room, yay, Stanford is doing well in beach volleyball. They are doing well in beach volleyball, but they did have a loss over the weekend. They lost to number 16 Long Beach State 3-2, which the first meeting between Long Beach State and Stanford was also 3-2, but it went in Stanford's favor. But for this one, Long Beach State took it narrowly 3-2. Now, you got to give credit to Long Beach State. They've played a very tough schedule. And I'm not trying to put down Stanford. I'm not trying to say Stanford whiffed on that one. I'm saying that Long Beach State's tough schedule early on is starting to pay dividends for them. And it also showed last weekend in the Big West Invitational, where their only loss came at the hands of number 9 Hawaii by 3-2. So I think Stanford, obviously that blip on the radar kind of raises a couple eyebrows, but that's more so Long Beach State having a very tough schedule. And yes, Gina, they are the dominant against the Bay Area teams, and I totally agree. And I think they're going to continue to be the dominant team from Northern California. Now that I mentioned Hawaii, they kind of had a rough weekend, going 2-4 in the Mapes Beach Invitational. They lost to TCU, USC, UCLA, and LSU. But just like Long Beach State, Hawaii's tough matches and their tough scheduling is going to pay dividends for them when it comes to the Big West Conference tournament or the NCAA tournament, should they make it. And it would also give the committee something to look at as if Hawaii can make the NCAA tournament as an at-large. Just because it's kind of tough for them to get in, because the Big West Conference is going to be a 3-horse race. Long Beach State has that potential, Cal Poly has that potential, and Hawaii has that potential. I'm not trying to say the other teams don't have the potential, but for me, I think those are the three teams that are going to be fighting one another for who's going to be the best team in the Big West Conference. We'll have to see what happens with those teams going forward. For Hawaii, I would not really stress over this past weekend. I think this is basically a wake-up call for them, just like last week when they lost to UC Davis 3-2. I think for Hawaii, this is basically going to be their make-or-break moment. I think now that they had this bad weekend, they can only go up from here on out. They can't get any worse than that. I mean, the only way they get worse is if they just start losing left and right, which is not going to happen. This is a Hawaii team that is very talented across the board. They're not your grandmother's team that's basically going to try to make cookies and whatnot. But I digress. So that's going to basically do it for the NCAA Beach Volleyball talk. All in all, it was just a very wild weekend with results flying all over the place, close matches coming in left and right. I was even wondering, my goodness, could this team actually lose? Because I thought LSU was going to pull out at least 2 wins. Well, not 2 wins, 2 match wins against USC. I thought they were only going to lose like 3-2, and it was going to have to come down to like the number 1 pairing. But for USC, they're proving why they're the reigning national champions. Again, not trying to say LSU isn't going to win or any other team isn't going to win the whole thing. I'm just saying it's up for grabs this year. Any team can probably win it. Even Stanford could win it. Even Cal can win it. Even Cal State Bakersfield can win it. Okay, now I'm just making stretches, but you get what I'm trying to say. So, before I end the NCAA Beach Volleyball talk, I do want to give a shout out to said pair, Kristen Noose and Teran Rodriguez, who actually won in the Beach Volleyball Nations League, or the Volleyball World Beach Pro Tour Futures, as they actually won in Coolangatta, Australia. They won that little tournament, winning the championship match over Nicole Laird and Phoebe Bell, 19-21, 21-9, and 15-7 in the gold medal match. That was huge for them, just because they're still a very young pair, and they're still new to this whole pro beach volleyball scene. And I think they're only 1 or 2 years, I think they're not even a full 2 years removed from the NCAA. And they're taking the whole beach circuit by storm. They're doing really good, and you have to feel rather impressed by what Noose and Cloth are doing. I think they are doing great things, and I really think that they can make a push when it comes to being one of the top teams in the AVP. And obviously, I think that it's really impressive. It's not just going to be one talented team. And I'm not trying to say that it sucks that April Ross and Alex Kleinman aren't going to be the top pair. But I'm saying that we're going to get some more parity. We're going to get other pairs trying to challenge the A team. And honestly, I think it's going to be huge that we're going to see bigger and better pairs. And honestly, I think it's going to be a fun little it's going to be fun to see what the AVP has in store and what the pro volleyball circuit has in store. As we also saw Teran Rodriguez and Zana Muno take third place in the same event, as that team actually lost to Noose and Cloth in the semifinals. But again, that's another good pair to watch for, as Zana Muno, well, unlike Teran Cloth and Kristen Noose, Zana Muno and Teran Rodriguez have been removed from college for more than 2 years. What's more impressive from Kristen and Teran is that both of those players, once again, I don't even think they're a full year removed from college, because they exited LSU from last year, and it hasn't even been 1 full year. So they're not even 1 full year removed, which is very impressive. And I think they're only in their early 20s. And the fact that they're still having this great team chemistry really should have other beach volleyball partners quaking in the sand. Again, it's still early, but I'm very impressed by what Teran and Kristen have accomplished. They even get a whopping 400 points they split as a team, as now they can challenge the second-tier events moving forward when it comes to the Volleyball World Beach Pro Tour. And I think this could possibly be the pair of tomorrow. This could probably be a pair playing in the Olympics coming up in 2026. Now, there's still a long way to go, and you never know what could happen, but if these two players stay together for a while and they continue to grow, work on their craft, and work on their cohesion, this could be a deadly pair to watch for in the Olympics going forward. So that's pretty much that for Kristen Nuss and Teran Cloth. I don't know, I feel I'm still saying Kristen's last name wrong, but if I am, I apologize. It's Nuss. I believe it's Nuss, but I digress. So that is that for all the beach volleyball talk. Let's jump on over to the NVA, because that's what the title is called. NVA Live 2022, just because it's basically, I wouldn't say it's a ripoff, but it's basically a pun of NBA Live 2000 and something. I wonder if that series is still going on, even though 2K is probably taking over. But I digress. Talking about the NVA here. So the NVA starts this weekend. It starts on Friday, and all the matches will be hosted at the Pierce Sports Center in San Bernardino. The first matchup will feature the reigning champion Orange County Stunners against the Seattle Sasquatch. That matchup will start at 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's going to be a fun little matchup just because the Stunners are the reigning champion, while the Sasquatch are basically the new upcoming team. They're the new created team. They're the expansion team. It's basically going to be new school versus the old school. Well, I wouldn't call the Orange County Stunners old school, but new team versus long-time team when it comes to the NVA. There you go. And then after that matchup, starting at noon Pacific time, we have the Utah Stingers versus the Colorado Kraken. That's also going to be a OG team versus a new team. That's also going to be a fun little matchup just because the Stingers, had a very good run. They lost in the semifinals, but they're going to face a new Colorado Kraken team. I think that's going to be a great matchup, and I'm excited for that matchup. Following that matchup will be the Las Vegas Ramblers taking on Southern Exposure, which is located in Florida and whatnot. That matchup will start up at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So the Ramblers, the runner-up in last year's NVA championship, take on a very talented Southern Exposure team. For me, I think Southern Exposure and the Las Vegas Ramblers are going to be the match of the day right there. Just because Southern Exposure, they have a lot of potential, and they really turned turned it on when it came to late in the season. They even won their conference, and I'll be darned if they can win their conference again. I'm going to talk about the conference later on, but the Ramblers are also going to be good as well. I feel the Las Vegas Ramblers still have that potential from last year. I also should make note for the Orange County Stunners, jumping back to the Orange County Stunners, that Nick Amato is not playing for the Stunners this year. He is still coaching at Long Beach State in men's volleyball, but I'm certain he'll try to get back onto the pro volleyball circuit soon. But for right now, he is coaching at Long Beach State. Jumping back to the NVA, we have the Texas Tyrants taking on the Los Angeles Blaze. That matchup will be starting up at 6 p.m. Pacific time. So the Texas Tyrants had themselves an early exit in the playoffs as they face the Los Angeles Blaze, who kind of is going to be the home team. But all in all for Texas, it's going to be a fun little matchup for them. I think Texas still has a lot of great potential. I want to say they still have Gianluca Grosso, who was a stud at USC. And then Los Angeles is going to look to try to get back into the postseason after missing it. I think it's going to be a fun little matchup right there. And that concludes the first bit of matches, the first day of matches. Then, starting tomorrow, we have Team Freedom of New Jersey taking on the Seattle Sasquatch. This will be on April 9th, and it'll start at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So Team Freedom, another talented team from last year, made the postseason, taking on the new expansion team, Seattle Sasquatch. I think that's going to be a nice little matchup right there. I think the Sasquatch can, once they've gotten their feet wet against a very talented Stunners team, I think they'll be able to try to find their way and try to find success against Team Freedom, who is also an OG team. So Seattle is basically going to try to rep their Northwest territory, and then New Jersey, Team Freedom is going to try to represent up east, up in New Jersey. So we'll see. Jumping on over to the next matchup, we have the Dallas Tornadoes taking on the Colorado Kraken. That matchup will be at noon Pacific time. So the Dallas Tornadoes are a second-year team taking on the Colorado Kraken, who are a first-year team. It's another great matchup. I want to say the Colorado Kraken's coach is the former Dallas Tornadoes coach. I'm not entirely certain. Don't quote me on that, but I did hear that Colorado's coach used to coach one of the other previous teams in the NVA. But for Colorado, it's going to be a fun little matchup against the Tornadoes. The Tornadoes had themselves a late push to the season. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough to make the postseason, as Dallas is going to look to try to make the postseason this year. I think it's doable for them. We shall see. Following Dallas versus Colorado, we have the Chicago Untouchables taking on the Los Angeles Blaze. That'll be a 3 p.m. Pacific time start. So Chicago was also I want to say they were also a playoff team. I'm blanking on the teams that made the playoffs last year, as a lot happens in one year, as the Los Angeles Blaze will be taking on Chicago. Honestly, I think that's going to be a great matchup right there. And you have to love Chicago's team name, the Untouchables. It just sounds so great. I had to agree with Adam Karnick, who previously loved the Chicago Untouchables nickname right there. So just got to throw that out for you. And then closing out the matches for Saturday, we have the Ontario Matadors taking on Southern Exposure. The Ontario Matadors missed the postseason last year as they take on a talented Southern Exposure team. Ontario is basically the home team for this matchup just because they're kind of the closest one to San Bernardino. So I think it's kind of going to be a great home opener. So we'll see what happens. As Gina says, I need to keep up on some Colorado volleyball low-key. Yes. The game is growing all over the place, not just in California or up east or in Hawaii. It's growing in Colorado. It's growing in Texas. It's even growing down south in Florida. So there you go. And yes, I do need to catch up on some Colorado volleyball as well. Jumping over to Sunday's matchups, the first matchup will be the Texas Tyrants versus the Chicago Untouchables, starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So once again, these are two OG teams facing one another, and they both made the playoffs last year. They both lost in the first round. For the Tyrants, I think this will be kind of their coming out match where I feel that they should win, but you can never count out Chicago. You never know who Chicago has or what this season's going to be like, because this is only the first event. After event number 1, there's not going to be another event for probably a month. So for the Tyrants, I think this is kind of going to be their early season. They got to come up big matchup. And you also got to remember that Texas isn't going to play on Saturday, so they have a day to rest, and they should be ready for Chicago. We'll see. Chicago will already have their feet wet, and they'll be hopefully ready for Texas. I hope that Chicago can give Texas a good matchup and vice versa, so we'll see. Next matchup following that at noon Pacific time, we have the Utah Stingers taking on the Dallas Tornadoes. Second-year program versus OG program or OG team or second-year team. Regardless, I think this is going to be a fun little matchup for the Stingers and the Tornado. I feel Utah is still loaded as ever, but you never know what happened in the offseason. I haven't really been paying attention when it comes to the NVA offseason, when it comes to like drafts and whatnot or signings. Regardless, I think it's going to be a great matchup. This weekend's basically going to be getting everyone's feet wet. And it's going to be a fun little match. It's going to be a fun little weekend of NVA. And then the last two matchups feature the Orange County Centers facing Team Freedom. So it's basically East Coast versus Orange County. And it's going to be a nice little matchup right here. I am really looking forward to this. It's the reigning NVA champions versus a team that's up and coming with potential. I think Team Freedom can give the Stunners a battle, especially since the Stunners will not have Nick Amato. But I feel that the Stunners have a lot of potential, and I think that they're out to defend their crown. I feel that the Stunners have what it takes to basically defend. I wouldn't call it their home court just because Orange County all the way up to San Bernardino is quite the drive, but I think they're going to defend their crown quite nicely. We'll see what happens this weekend when Orange County takes on Seattle and Team Freedom. And then closing out the matchup or the event for this weekend will be the Las Vegas Ramblers versus the Ontario Matadors. Basically, it's the runner-up from last year versus the home team, the official home team. So I think for Ontario, this is kind of going to be a big early test for them. I think it was last year where Ontario had to win and had to play a win and in game, but unfortunately they fell short. I want to say it was against the Ramblers. I'm not entirely certain, but either way, the Matadors know that all these wins are precious and they have to come up big, and they cannot leave matches on the table. I feel if they do, then they're going to put themselves behind the 8 ball going forward, and it's not going to be fun for them. But I feel if they get themselves going early on, then I think the wins will start to come at them slowly but surely. So something I didn't mention last week when it came to the NVA is that there are actually new divisions. There's the American. I mentioned that there were conferences, the American Conference and the National Conference. But what I didn't mention was there were actually 2 divisions when it came to the American Conference and the National Conference. And that's partially my fault, so I apologize. But the American and National Conference have the Coastal Conference and the Central Conference. The American Coastal Conference consists of the Las Vegas Ramblers, Southern Exposure, and the Ontario Matadors, while the American Central consists of the Colorado Kraken, the Utah Stingers, and the Dallas Tornadoes. Then the National Coastal Conference consists of the Seattle Sasquatch, Team Freedom, and the Orange County Stunners. And then the National Central Conference consists of the Los Angeles Blaze, the Texas Tyrants, and the Chicago Untouchables. It's kind of weird how they globalized, well, not globalized, but they regionalized each conference. I would think they would put the Stunners, the Blaze, and the Matadors all in the same conference just because they're all in California. And then they'd put the Ramblers, the Sasquatch, and the Kraken in the same conference just because they're in the same region, the Pacific region. And then go on from there. But I guess this whole placing of the divisions works because the thing I think I understand why the Stunners, the Blaze, and the Matadors aren't in the same conference just is because, well, I feel if the Stunners repeat if the Stunners are as good as they were last year, and the Matadors aren't as good as last year, and the Blaze aren't as good as last year, or if they're worse than last year, no offense to them, it's basically going to be a one-horse race. And that would not be fair to some of the other teams. So, basically, those teams that are playing one another in the Coastal Conference, they're all facing one another in their conference. It's kind of like the opposite of the NFL's final week of the season, where everyone plays everyone in their division on the last day of the season. So, take, for example, the American Coastal Conference. This weekend, the Ramblers are playing Southern Exposure, and then the Ramblers are also playing the Matadors. They're all in the same Coastal Conference. And the same can be said for the American Central, the National Coastal, and the National Central. So, that's basically NVA 101. There are 12 NVA teams. Only one will be champion. And then there are 4 divisions, 2 conferences, 3 teams within each division. That's how it's going to be. And the NVA is only going to continue to grow and grow. And that's basically growing of the game. So that is that right there for the NVA. Let us jump on into Week 14 of the NCAA Men's Volleyball for this week, and I'll send you all on your way because obviously the national championship is playing and I gotta get me some dinner and I have some other things to attend to. But regardless, NCAA Men's Volleyball Week 14. So we'll start with the sneaky good matches. There's only one sneaky good match in my opinion just because it looks like most of the conferences are finalized. So my sneaky match of the week to watch for is NJIT at number 3 Penn State. That's going to be on a Saturday. Now, Penn State is the number 3 team in the nation, while NJIT is not ranked. NJIT hasn't really been consistent, while Penn State has, outside of that horrible the horrible week they had when they played UCLA, USC, and then they also lost to Santa Barbara as well. But when it comes to NJIT versus Penn State, I think this is kind of your rivalry match right here. Now, it's so weird for me to say that just because Penn State is up east in Pennsylvania, and then NJIT is up in New Jersey, but these two teams went 5 the first go-around, and also NJIT beat Penn State last year, so I would not be surprised if this matchup was as intense or as somewhat intense as Hawaii Long Beach State. I'm not trying to say NJIT Penn State is going to be super intense as Hawaii Long Beach State, but I think it could be just as intense. Just because both of these teams played each other so close the first go-around. So that's a sneaky good matchup to watch for. Jumping on over to the matches to watch for. Thursday, we have number 1 UCLA at number 5 Pepperdine. This is not my match of the week, but this could determine the MPSF regular season championship. If UCLA wins both of their matches against Pepperdine, they're the regular season champion. If Pepperdine splits, then they're still alive by a thread when it comes to possibly winning the regular season championship. Then if Pepperdine wins out against UCLA this weekend, then it gets interesting with Pepperdine going forward. But for UCLA, there's not a whole lot slowing down this Bruin team. Despite them being so young, with like a mixture of underclassmen and upperclassmen, I think UCLA could possibly overtake Pepperdine. Now, Pepperdine is not to be underestimated at the Firestone Fieldhouse. Pepperdine did take down USC at Firestone earlier in the season back in their MPSF opener. But as we saw last week, UCLA and USC are two totally different teams. For Pepperdine, they're going to really have to break out all the stops, as they're going to have to prove why they were chosen to win the MPSF regular season title earlier in the season when it came to the coaches poll or the media poll. Either way, Pepperdine has a lot to prove. They have to defend home court, and they're going to have to basically serve and pass well, and they're going to have to take advantage of UCLA's service errors. We'll have to see, and they're also going to have to do well on serve-receive. Jumping to Friday, we have number 10 UC San Diego at number 2 Long Beach State. Now, I'm debating on going to this matchup just because, well, it's a top 10 matchup, and hence the word if Long Beach State defeats UC San Diego, they inch closer and closer to clinching the regular season Big West Conference Championship. If they do so, if they win out, then they're basically the regular season champions, especially with what happens with Hawaii and Santa Barbara. Something I failed to mention earlier when I went over the recap of Week 13 is that Long Beach State now has the tiebreakers over Hawaii and UC Santa Barbara. So if Long Beach State wins out this weekend, they're the number 1 seed for the Big West Conference tournament. Now, that does not mean UC San Diego is going to roll over. UC San Diego, obviously coming off of a rough week, not rough weekend, but a weekend when they split their matches to CSUN. They're obviously going to try to get back on track. To do so, they're going to have to take down a very talented Long Beach State team that if UC San Diego wants to win, they're going to have to slow down the pin hitters from Long Beach State, such as Nikolov, Olivier, and Godbold. They're also going to need to get Ryan Ka and Kyle McCauley involved. They cannot have the night they had against Cal State Northridge the first go-around. Otherwise, it's going to be a recipe for disaster for them. Also on Friday, we have number 5 UC Santa Barbara at number 4 Hawaii. This is the previous match, and this matchup is also not my match/series of the week, as this is basically the battle for second place. Whoever wins, depending on what the results are, will finish second. But these two teams are probably going to meet each other in the Big West Conference semifinals if serve holds up. What also is crucial when it comes to finishing second in the Big West Conference regular season is the first round bye. If Hawaii finishes second, or if Santa Barbara finishes second, whoever finishes second will get a first round bye to the semifinals. That could be proven to be good and or bad. It can be proven good because you get some time to rest and you get time to scope out your opponent, but it could also be bad because you're rusty. Keep in mind that Hawaii had a first round bye and they wound up losing to UC San Diego in the semifinals in 5 sets. Still a legendary matchup to this day. So for the Gauchos and the Rainbow Warriors, it's basically going to be a battle for who gets that number 2 seed. I think it's going to be a great matchup. This is basically Hawaii's official last home series of the season, even though when it comes to the Big West Conference, they're going to have home games because the Big West Conference tournament takes place in Honolulu, Hawaii. So for Santa Barbara, this is their biggest test of the season. Can they win at Hawaii? Can they beat a powerhouse on the road? They have had some decent wins, but now is the time for them to prove themselves as a true top 10 team. Jumping over to Saturday, we have round 2 of all the previous matches that I just mentioned. Saturday, we have number 2 Long Beach State at UC San Diego. And then we also have number 5 UC Santa Barbara at number 4 Hawaii. And then we also have number 8 Pepperdine at number 1 UCLA. Starting off with Pepperdine and UCLA, Gina says, if I'm Hawaii and I'm at home, I want the bye. And I think that's what they want. They're going to want to bounce back after a rough weekend against Long Beach State, and they're going to want to play their hearts out, especially since it's going to be senior night. Jumping back to number 8 Pepperdine at number 1 UCLA. This time, UCLA will be the home team just because it's more manageable to go from Malibu to Los Angeles, as opposed to going from Hawaii to Long Beach in the span of 2 days. Regardless, I digress on that. And going back to Pepperdine UCLA, so UCLA has dropped a match this season at Pauley Pavilion. That was to Lewis. But ever since then, they haven't really lost at home. They didn't even lose to Long Beach State at home. So against Pepperdine, they have to take care of business at home. Once again, if they want to prove themselves as the dominant team in the MPSF and leave no doubt, they're going to want to win out, and they're basically not going to want to leave anything to chance going forward. Especially if, for some odd reason, Pepperdine does show their actual talented team. Because Pepperdine has some talented players on that team of theirs. They're pretty much solid throughout most of their positions. It's just all about if they could put that package together. Because Pepperdine was chosen to finish first in the MPSF, but they haven't really been able to show their true potential. I think this is kind of the weekend where they have to come up big, otherwise UCLA is going to run away with the regular season MPSF title. Either way, I think the Bruins are in a great position going forward, and they just can't afford to slip up along the way. Just because, looking at the MPSF, I want to say every team makes the tournament, and then the top seed is basically gets a bye. So the number one, the team that wins the regular season championship gets the first round bye. And it's the only bye, as they'll await the 5 versus 4 matchup when it comes to the MPSF semifinals or the quarterfinals. Jumping over to Long Beach State at UC San Diego. This time, UC San Diego and Long Beach State will be playing at the Rimac Arena in San Diego or La Jolla. Either way, the series will shift over to UC San Diego. Once again, if Long Beach State wins both of their matches against the Tritons, then basically they're the number 1 seed in the Big West Conference Tournament, and that could be a huge boost because they would not have to see Santa Barbara or Hawaii until the final. But they can't underestimate UC San Diego. Like I said, UC San Diego wants to bounce back after their weekend against CSUN. So we'll see what happens going forward with those two. And then Gina said it best, Hawaii wants to have the bye just because they need to have as much rest as possible. They have a very young team. The same can be said for UC Santa Barbara just because they lost a majority of their All-Americans. Same can be said for Hawaii, but like I said, Hawaii is starting 5 sophomores, 2 juniors, and then UC Santa Barbara is starting a plethora of new players, and they're trying to replace their old All-Americans. So all in all for the Gauchos and the Rainbow Warriors, it's basically going to be an all-out war. And for Santa Barbara, this is, once again, it's their big test. Can they win in a hostile environment? They were unable to win at Long Beach State. Can they win at Hawaii? Because they need to get used to Hawaii, considering they're going to be playing the Big West Conference Tournament there in a couple more weeks. And then after their matchup against Hawaii, they have one more home matchup against UC San Diego. Well, Big West Conference matchup, but you get what I mean. So I think Hawaii, UC Santa Barbara is going to be crucial. But all of those matchups that I just mentioned are not the match of the week. The match of the week, in my opinion, is number 7 Ball State at number 11 Loyola. Now, some people are saying that the AVCA is basically has a West Coast bias when it comes to some of these teams being ranked. I don't really have an opinion on that, but I think, for me, match of the week is for sure Ball State at Loyola. The winner of this matchup will probably be the MIVA regular season champion, and they'll get the number 1 seed. For Ball State, they're having a phenomenal season. They've only lost 2 matches. They haven't beat Hawaii twice, even though Hawaii wasn't at full strength the first match. But for Ball State, this is their time to shine. They lost the first matchup. Their only conference loss was to Loyola. Ever since then, they've beaten practically everybody. Now, for Loyola, they obviously are coming off of a solid weekend last weekend, but their 2 conference losses have come at the hands of McKendree. They have to come up big at home. we'll have to see what happens, but this is definitely the match of the week. This basically is make or break for either team. If Ball State wins the matchup against Loyola this weekend, then I think that pretty much locks up the MIVA regular season conference title, just because they only have one more match after that, and that's basically at Purdue of Fort Wayne. So for me, this basically is winner is the regular season conference champion, and then loser will be the number 2 seed. Unless, of course, for Loyola, they win, and then they have to win their final matchup, which I want to say is against Lewis. I'm not entirely sure about that, but I'm just going to double check right here and there, just because I want to be accurate. I want to say their final matchup is against... No, their final matchup is against Ohio State, so my apologies. This is why I want to double check things, just because normally you would face your rival at the final match of the season, hence Ball State versus Purdue of Fort Wayne. However, for the case of Loyola of Chicago, they are home against Ohio State in their final MIVA regular season conference game. So if Loyola does beat Ball State, then the two will be tied for first place. And then if that is the case, then Loyola has the tiebreaker over Ball State in terms of head-to-head. But if Ball State beats Loyola, then they are the number 1 seed and they are the regular season champion. For Loyola, this is a huge must-win game for them, just because if they want to avoid McKendree until the final, they have to be the number 1 seed. The only way McKendree does not become the number 1, if the only way Loyola avoids McKendree, or the only way McKendree and Loyola don't face each other in the final, is if they meet in the semifinals, which, if that happens, then McKendree would have to lose out its final 2 games, which McKendree plays Lindenwood, and then they also close out the season against lowly Quincy, which I'm pretty sure McKendree is going to win both those matches. So for me, Loyola has to avoid McKendree when it comes to the MIVA tournament until they face them in the final. So Loyola has to come up big at home, otherwise it could be a I wouldn't say somewhat of a disaster, but it could be something that they don't want to see. Loyola is 9-3 at home, and they've won 3 in a row, but this is a Ball State team that's taken the entire nation by storm. I don't think anybody predicted Ball State to being this good, and hats off to Ball State. They are just doing so great this season, and I think this is good for all of NCAA volleyball. The MIVA is now relevant again. This is MIVA madness, and I think it's going to be a battle on Thursday between Ball State and Loyola. Ball State has won 10 in a row, and they're 8-1 on the road. Their only road blemish was against BYU, which was number 9 at the time, which they actually held a 2-0 lead, but unfortunately they lost it, which is not fun for Ball State, but I think they were still trying to figure out themselves. This was all the way back in February. Their last loss on the road was 2 months ago, so I think Ball State is a much different team. So we'll see what happens with Ball State and Loyola going into Thursday. That basically is the match of the week, and I don't care what anyone says. You cannot convince me that that is not the match of the week. Loyola, Ball State, match of the week. End of discussion. Drop the mic. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point, and that's also going to do it for the Week 14 matches to watch for. Thank you all for tuning in. Without any further delay, let's drop that beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate you all tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen for all 1 hour and 9 minutes plus, I really, really do appreciate you. You are what keeps me going. Shout out to Gina G in the chat room. She pretty much stayed throughout all 1 hour plus. I really do appreciate you. Your support for Set Point does not go unnoticed. I appreciate you. I also appreciate the other people in the chat room, Marcus Vitale and Cale Henderson, for stopping by. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourselves a great rest of the week. I might be at Long Beach State for this week's matchup against UC San Diego at the Pyramid. We'll see. I'll probably see you all then or on Saturday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Have a great night, everybody. Peace!